In this video, we'll show you how to mount the precision parabolic damper onto the 2023 and later generation frame of KTM, Husqvarna, and GasGas. Be sure you have the correct damper and linkage for your bike and the handle position you are running. Here, this bike is in position 1. Notice how the offset is toward the rider. Closest to the rider is position 1. If you turn the clamps 180, that would be position 2. If you have multiple holes, the next hole away from the rider, offset toward rider's position 3, and then furthest away from the rider would be position 4. Let's go ahead and remove the number plate. Just take the screw off. Now we're going to remove the wire harness bracket, remove the 2 screws that hold the bracket. Now we're going to remove the handlebar top clamp, taking these 4 screws out. Use a number 45 Torx head to remove the bottom 2 bolts that hold the bottom handlebar clamp. In this video, after we remove the clamp, we're going to cut the top and bottom clamps so that the precision can grab onto the middle of your handlebars and use solid cones. There's lots of other options, and we will leave a link with all those different options you can use for handlebar clamps. Now to remove the rubber pieces, it's nice to spray it, a little Tri-Flow or any kind of penetrating lubricant, and then tap out the aluminum piece. There we go. And then you can remove the rubber. Put a light film of grease on the solid aluminum cones with Viton inserts, and then place them into the triple clamp. Do the same with the bottom cones, and then put the bolt through the aluminum cone and up through the other cone. Now we're going to put the bottom clamp that we cut onto the screw. Sometimes it's easier to turn the clamp. Now remember, you're going to want to determine front or back position 1 or 2. And like we said, this bike was in position 1, and we're going to leave it in position 1. And we're going to torque it. If we had turned it 180, we would be in position 2. So we're just going to tighten these screws, but we're not going to put a big torque to them yet. We do that after we put the handlebars in. Use blue Loctite on these bolts. And we're going to, of course, repeat the process for the second clamp. And make sure that they end up pointing the same direction. If it's position 1, make sure the second clamp's also in position 1. Now we're putting the handlebars back on. Make sure your cables are the right way. Now for your top handlebar clamps, you could use Precision's 1-piece unit. It goes on like so, but for this purposes, we're just going to use the cut version of the stock handlebar top clamps. Now go ahead and align your handlebars and screw down your clamps in the position you like them, and then go ahead and torque them to factory spec. Once your handlebars are on and torqued to factory spec, now we can go ahead and finish tightening up these bottom bolts, and then of course torque those to factory spec as well. So maybe you're moving your Parabolic from your old frame bike to a new frame bike, and the pivot, you're going to use your old pivot dog, and it didn't come obviously with the mount. Go and get your pivot dog, get it all greased up, put the Teflon back in, put the washers on it, and then go ahead and squeeze your clamp and slide it into the clevis Try and get it kind of lined up with the hole so you can put the screw in, and then put a little Loctite on that screw, just to be sure, blue Loctite preferably. And then we're going to assemble that and then torque it. Torque the pivot dog mounting screw to 9 Newton meters. This on the part of the mount that goes behind the plate. There's this little lip right here. That lip's going to go right where, the same place that the rubber seal right here goes. See how it sits on top of that lip? Let's get the blue Loctite out again and put a little bit onto the screws we're going to use in that front mount. Okay, we're going to put that front mount. Remember, we're going to put it on that lip. It really nests in there nice, so jiggle it up and down and back and forth. And then you can grab the part that goes closest to the rider and put that right in there. If you hold it with your thumb and forefinger or index finger, you can hold right at the gaps between the two and put those screws in. By using your fingers, you can feel the gaps and try and keep them even as you just start to snug up that. And if you feel it uneven, you might want to loosen one a little and tighten the other one, and make sure it's nested and staying right where it's supposed to be. And then we can snug it up and then check the gaps from the side once we have it close here. So go ahead and take a visual from each side and make sure the gaps look pretty close, before we actually torque them. Now we're going to torque these two screws to 8.5 Newton meters. Now work them back and forth, keep working them and get them, until they, pretty much stop giving and are at 8.5 Newton meters. Okay, now we're going to get the boot and put the boot on. The small hole goes down and the larger hole goes up on the boot. Slide it down over your pivot dog and then put the pin in. Super tight fit on this, so it'll compress air and want to go up. Sometimes you have to hold it down for a second. And then we'll go ahead and get the damper clamp on and just kind of snug it up a little bit. We're not going to tighten it yet. So center up the damper between the clamps, and then get your handlebars straight ahead like you're going straight down the road. Push that pivot dog down, all the way down until it bottoms out, and then we're going to back it up just 1 millimeter. So we're going to push it all the way down and then have just a 1 millimeter back off on it before we tighten up these screws. So it's not a bad idea to get a scale or a caliper and try and get this damper, centered up as best you can before we finish tightening it down. Yeah, now remember, you're going to want to make sure you don't lose track of the up and down motion as to where the pin is in the pivot dog, and you want it all the way down, bar straight ahead, back it off just 1 millimeter, and then we can put the boot on. Now, if you're running the forwarder positions, position 2, 3, or 4, then you don't pitch the damper as much. See how we have a lot of pitch here? That's because we're closest to the rider. As we go further out, the pitch is less. You don't angle it down as much. The damper stays more parallel to the triple clamp. So a good way to check if you have your geometry right is to put an edge like we're doing here and then rotate the bars. The gap from going straight to turning left or right should only be 1 millimeter or 2. So in the closer positions, the pivot dog will pivot just a little bit away from the rider as you turn the bars. In the further out positions, say 3 or 4, it may come back toward the rider just a bit also. If the pivot dog's pivoting too far away from the rider, you need to pitch the damper down further. Once we have that right, we want to make sure we can hit the stops. Very important that we use the bike stops and don't use your damper as a stop. So we want to make sure we can hit our stops and the damper, you don't feel any motion. Make sure the lever, center of the lever here, doesn't go past that little line on the housing. That means you're bottoming out on your lever. And so if you're unable to hit that stop, slide the damper toward the stop you can't hit, just a millimeter or two. And then repeat the process. Make sure you're able to hit both stops. Once you are, now we can torque the damper. 7 Newton meters. If you're running clamps that have motion, like these PHS clamps or shock and vibes or anything of that nature, you need to account for that motion. So we're going to bottom out and then back it up before we clamp to allow that motion. So here we're starting at about 4 millimeters and we're going to take it to about 9 to 10 millimeters. PHDS, you want to leave a good 5 millimeters of motion. And then we're going to, of course, torque. Now we're doing this without the boot, so you can actually see what's going on there. Okay, now we're going to get and mount that plastic wire harness back on. Screw that on, of course, torque it to factory spec, etc. Get that hour meter, position that into place too, put the screw in. You may be wondering why there's a zip tie and plastic tubing. It's to keep the cables away from getting tangled up. Zip tie through the tubing, then wrap the zip tie around the pivot dog, put the tube between the cables, and then go around the cables and through the zip tie. And then you just snug it, obviously tighten the zip tie on down, and then of course we're going to clip the end of the zip tie once we snug it up. And you'll see how that keeps those cables away, and so they don't get tangled up with the lever, pivot dog, or anything else. Be sure to watch the setting the high speed and low speed video. We will leave a link. Well, let's finish up. We'll put our number plate back on. And then we can put a bar pad on if we want. There we go. Nice thing, you can get your bar pad. You can buy these bar pads online too with a hole cut in them for the damper. And that allows you to be able to adjust the damper without having to remove your bar pad, which is nice, and it gives you that security of having a bar pad, and you can still change your settings. Well, we certainly hope this was helpful. Let's go ride.